businessman. So I moved 5,000 miles from Great Britain so that I could get some nice weather and some nice warmth. So if you guys could arrange to bring that back, I would be most grateful. It is a great privilege and a great honour to be asked to come and make a few comments today, especially considering you're celebrating veterans. My great-grandfather was a man who absolutely loved war veterans. He loved the army, he loved all of the services, but he particularly liked the American armed forces as well. Many of you probably know that my great-grandfather was actually half American, and I maintain that that's how he managed to win the war. Because, you know, you guys believe that with hard work anything is possible, and you proved that on many, many occasions. You know, we in Britain, you know, people ask me what's it like living in the United States as a Brit, and I equate it as standing at the bottom of a mountain, looking up, saying to my English friend that I really would like to climb that mountain. And my English friend would turn to me and say, "Are you sure you want to do that, Jonathan? You know, it's a little high. Maybe, you know, try climbing that hill over there. That will be much easier." And if I turn to my American friend and I say the same thing, that I want to climb that mountain, the first question out of his or her mouth is, "How can I help you? What can I do to help you? Let's go there together." And veterans are exactly like that. They are people who believe that they can... A little closer. Okay, sorry. Let me take this out. Okay, veterans are very much people who believe that you can achieve anything. You can achieve the impossible. When you're sent out to places like Afghanistan and Iraq, you really are faced with situations that look impossible. And but for these brave men and women who actually go out and serve, we wouldn't be free today. But for the great men and women of Europe and indeed of the United States, this country would belong to the Russians. My country would belong to the Nazis. And I wouldn't actually exist at all. My entire family would have been sent to the gas chambers. So I am incredibly grateful, and particularly grateful to veterans. I'm one of these people that has to turn up 4 hours before my aeroplane leaves to go anywhere, because I like to go around the airport, and anytime I see somebody in a uniform, I like to go and shake their hand, and I like to thank them for the wonderful service that they have given. It is so, so vital. In 1945, at the victory of Europe, my great-grandfather stood in front of millions of people who had gathered, and he simply said, "This is your victory." And he was saying that mainly to the veterans who had actually fought in that particular war. And he spent an inordinate amount of time going to visit veterans and going to form relationships with veterans and talk to them about war stories. When he was over in the United States, I know that some of you know that he would visit the White House quite frequently. And quite often he would be seen walking up and down the halls of the White House completely naked. Now this wasn't because he was trying to be cute. The idea of Winston Churchill naked is probably not the best thought in people's minds. But he had absolutely no idea that he was naked. He was so engrossed in what he was doing, in what he was planning, that he didn't really think, "Oh gosh, I'm not wearing any clothes." And there was one occasion that FDR wanted to see my great-grandfather, and there was a Marine posted outside Churchill's door at the White House. And he had the inevitable task of going to wake my great-grandfather up at about 1 o'clock in the morning. So he knocks on the door. No answer. So he knocks again. Still no answer. So he knocks, and this time he says, "Prime Minister, Prime Minister." Still no response. So he decides to open the door. He opens the door and is met with a spread eagle, totally naked Churchill, lying face down on his bed. Anyway, Churchill opens one of his eyes and looks at the Marine. And he looks at him and says, "What do you want?" Well, you know, guys, those of you who are Marines, you know that you've been trained to take anything. You can go through the most incredible amount of pain. You can see the most incredibly terrible things, and you can walk away from those without being scarred. This chap stood there, and he stuttered. all the way through his information. Prime Minister, the President wants to see you, son. Anyway, Churchill went downstairs and he went and sat with FDR and they chatted for about half an hour. Half an hour later, he came back up. The Marine was standing outside the door, literally. I mean, you know, Churchill was about this size. Okay, the Marine was about that size. So he was just looking straight forward and ignoring my great-grandfather's bald head as he passed. Anyway, Churchill hid a smile as he went into his room. The next thing the Marine knew is the door opened again, and my great-grandfather invited the man to come in. Over a period of 2.5 hours, the two of them talked. They talked about his family, about his aspirations after the war, and they also talked about his take on the war. And Churchill asked what he would do in certain situations. My great-grandfather took a lot of that information from that conversation and farmed it in over Britain, and some of it we actually used on D-Day. The Marine hadn't been out of the Corps for more than 6 months out of training. He was brand new. Why on earth would my great-grandfather ask somebody who had no real experience whatsoever about the war and how to fight it? But that was the type of person that my great-grandfather was. He was a person who would listen to anyone who actually made sense. And that is something that I have learned to do myself. I love talking to veterans. I love hearing the stories. One of the things that I'm trying to achieve is to gather together all the stories of veterans of all wars and also current serving personnel. I believe that these people, beyond anyone, must be remembered in history. Because my great-grandfather warned that a nation that forgets its history is doomed to repeat it. And we will. And let me just leave you with a warning. Churchill predicted the Second World War for the first time when he was 13 years old. He predicted what was going to happen with Russia in 1946. He predicted a Third World War, which fortunately has not occurred. But we are close to it if we don't start taking care and start thinking of our history. I always like to finish on a funny story. So I'm going to tell you one of my favourite Churchill stories, because many people ask me to recount some of the funny stories. He had a son-in-law called Vic Oliver. And Vic Oliver was a failed amateur dramatic artist. Now, I can understand if you fail at professional acting or something like that. But to fail as an amateur, you know, that's got to be quite a feat. You know, that really does have to be quite a feat. Anyway, this chap Vic Oliver managed to fail as an amateur, and he married Sarah Churchill, my great-grandparents' second child. And the marriage was most unpopular. My family was not happy with it. Anyway, they were sitting around the table at number 10 Downing Street, and this was during the war. And my great-grandfather was looking very, very sullen, very sad. And the family was sitting around, and Vic Oliver decided he was going to try and cheer the old man up. So he looked at him and he said, "Papa, in your view, who is the greatest statesman alive?" Everybody expected my great-grandfather to name himself. Churchill looked up, and you could tell when Churchill was going to insult you, because a big smile would appear on his face. His eyes would go wide and they would light up. This is exactly what happened on that particular occasion. As he looked at Vic Oliver and he said, "Benito Mussolini." Well, for those of you who don't know, which I'm sure that you all know, Benito Mussolini was a fascist. And everybody the room went completely still. Why on earth would this man name a fascist who he absolutely hates? Vic Oliver didn't take the hint to shut up and decided he was going to ask a further question. And so he said to Churchill, he said, "Papa, why on earth did you choose Mussolini?" Big smile, eyes wide, lit up. Because Mussolini is the only leader to have had the prerequisite courage to have his son-in-law shot. If Vic Oliver didn't know what his in-laws thought of him before, he certainly did then. The marriage incidentally ended about 6 months later, although I don't think it was as a direct result of what Churchill had said. Anyway, I just would like to say thank you very much indeed. God bless to all of you, but particularly God bless to the veterans. And thank you so much indeed for everything that you do for us. God bless you. Take care. Come on.